Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be getting into episodes 592 through 594, which will cover manga chapters 666 through 668. Man, that is a mouthful. In this set of episodes, we are about to cover one of the cornerstone events in the series that will change the course of the entire adventure. So, synopsis. The Yeti Cool Brothers, after taking out Sanji, Brook, and Zoro, go after the kids, Nami and Chopper, and now Luffy needs to go after them to rescue Nami, who was taken by the pair. Along the way, they get help from a very unexpected person who has a very shocking proposition for Luffy and the Straw Hats. Alright, so differences. There aren't too many fundamental differences. It's just most of the scenes are extended or have a little extra added to them to pad out time, whether it's several extended moments of Luffy fighting the Yetis, or Smoker fighting the Centaurs, or the final sequence where the slime monster appears and it's chasing down the two Centaurs on the fire side of the island. All of those scenes have a few extra scenes just kind of added to elongate them. But I'd say one of the major fundamental changes that I didn't like is when the Yetis attack the cave that the kids are being guarded in. In the anime, for some reason, they changed Nami's behavior here, which I really don't like at all. So in the manga, you see from the explosion, a bunch of debris starts falling from the ceiling of the cave. She and Chopper are in there instinctively. Nami actually tries to cover and shield as many of the small children with Frankie's hands, basically, since they're gigantic. And in the anime, for some reason, they make it so that she covers only her own head, which is a small but an incredibly fundamental change in the wrong direction, I feel like. Like, Nami not instinctively trying to protect the kids just kind of betrays everything about her character and how kids and money and her nakama are basically like the three most important things that she's willing to put her life on the line for at any time. So to have her act selfishly here is just plain bad, and it's a bad change that was completely unnecessary, and I feel like it was just kind of an oversight maybe, because it just seems so weird, because all they had to do is make it so that instead of her covering her head, she just holds her hands out above the kids to protect as many of them from the falling rocks. I don't understand why they changed this. It just seems really weird. The second change that I found, at least big change, was during the whole sequence where Usopp's trying to explain to Law what an alliance really is with Luffy. You see Luffy, picking his nose and then flinging the booger on Chopper. That part was added in the anime, which I thought was an awesome change because it's freaking hilarious. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's get into the episodes themselves. To start these episodes off, there's another interesting slight dialogue change. This doesn't really change anything, but when the Yeti Cool Brothers are calling in that they took care of Zoro, Sanji, and Brook, in the anime they say in Japanese, "Sannin wo katazuketa," which is basically, we took care of the three of them. However, in the manga, they report it as "shitai ga mitsu korogatteru hazu," which is, you should find 3 corpses lying around there. It's interesting the change here because I have no idea why they changed this other than maybe to soften the language. But the funny thing is they talk about whether they killed them later, so it doesn't really make any difference. They seem to talk about dead bodies and all that stuff. Maybe it's the word shitai, which is a corpse or dead body. That's the biggest thing, but I feel like that word comes up pretty often anyway, so it just seems like a really random change. But anyways, getting into the actual story, they split up yet again with Luffy, Usopp, Robin, and Frankie headed to the lab to get answers from Caesar about the kids, and that leaves Chopper and Nami to take care of the kids. Brownbeard wakes during the attack, remarking that it's probably the Yeti Cool Brothers, and Nami presses him for more info, but at first he makes it seem like these guys are shrouded in mystery with very little known about them, but then he just keeps talking and talking and talking, going into more and more detail about who they are, what they look like, their names are Scotch and Rock, which is obviously a reference to alcohol with Scotch on the rocks, or Scotch with ice, to then beginning to talk about their island of origin and their ages, which is like 45, to which Nami finally yells back, "You know quite a bit about them," which I found as a pretty funny joke. But during all this entire long-winded explanation, Scotch somehow stealthily sneaks his way into the cave and reveals that not only are the 2 Straw Hats on their kill list, but so is he, to which he's shocked at first and thinks it's a mistake, But it turns out he wasn't mistaken, and as annoying as this guy has been, you kind of feel bad for him at this moment. Yeah, he's a pirate and a henchman that helped Caesar perpetuate some of those unspeakable things we've heard him talk about, but you get the sense that he truly believed that he was just doing good by someone that he thought had saved his life and truly valued him. And yet again, Oda has this uncanny ability to turn characters on their heads in our eyes and completely change the way we look at villains into sympathetic characters in an instant sometimes. And when you're watching his brief flashback of how he got his legs back and how much he enjoyed being a security guard for Caesar, for that brief time, he seemed like a good dude trying to repay his life debt to Caesar. To see him utterly break down at the knowledge that he was only being used and is now being cast away like garbage, you feel really sorry for him, and just adds another reason to hate Caesar even more. Unfortunately, Nami in Frankie's body gets abducted so that Caesar can understand why Frankie has the ability to fire Vegapunk's laser beams. And speaking of Frankie, Luffy decides to set off to rescue Nami, but because it's Frankie's body that was taken, he himself wants to go after the Yetis as well and asks Chopper to give him the transformation beans, aka the rumble balls. And Chopper warns him that they're really powerful and that he probably won't be able to control that amount of power, and he insists that he can with his super spirit. But during Chopper's explanation, he mentions that they only last for 3 minutes and should be used at the right moment. But before Chopper can even finish this sentence, Frankie chomps down on it and immediately transforms into Monster Point and goes ballistic on Luffy. And the scene had me dying the first time I read it, and even now it's still hilarious. It just goes to show you just how much work Chopper puts into controlling all his transformations. And it's not just the physical, but it also is a mental thing as well. Luffy and the out-of-control Monster Point Frankie make their way to the Yeti Cool Brothers, where they have a trap laid for Luffy, who falls right into it. But thanks to Armament Haki, he easily breaks the Valley of Ice Spikes. And it's actually really cool, no pun intended, to see Luffy easily break through these spikes and then think back to just blasting through Don Krieg's spiked cape while punching holes in his own fist. Now he easily breaks through spikes 10 times bigger than that, pretty much unharmed. The rest is pretty much just your standard fight, and it doesn't really get interesting again till the end of this conflict, where Law makes a sudden appearance and betrays Scotch by slicing him in half unexpectedly. Although I can't say I was completely surprised by this turn of events, since Oda kept heavily hinting at something like this coming. But also, thinking about the Yeti Cool Brothers here, these are pretty, I don't know if they're cool, villains per se, or, henchmen, but I feel like there was a lot of missed potential with these guys. They should have been around for a little bit longer. They seemed really powerful and a little, on the more sinister side of things. And yet they're completely dispatched right here. And if our memory serves me correctly, I don't think they come back for the rest of the arc. But now that they've been saved, I find it humorous as Law is kind of speaking in this very serious tone. In the foreground, you see Luffy freeing Nami by biting through a massive metal chain, and even Nami's reaction being like, what the hell? It's pretty funny when you pay attention to Nami's face during this scene. And this is where one of the most significant moments in the entire series occurs, as Law mentions that deep within Punk Hazard there is some sort of key hidden that could turn the New World upside down, and that the only way to survive in the New World is to join under one of the four Yonko Emperors, or to challenge them and defeat them. So Law proposes that they form an alliance to take down one of the emperors, which is insane. Now this I did not see coming. Luffy obviously asks the most important question, which of the four does he want to take down, because one of them, of course, is his mentor and friend Shanks. He most likely does not want to challenge Shanks, at least not yet. Although we don't get to hear outright which one Law says at this moment, Luffy's positive reaction and agreement would indicate that it's one of the other three, either Big Mom, Kaido, or Blackbeard. And I remember back when I read this for the first time, my mind went to Big Mom as my theory, since she had already just picked a fight with Luffy back on Fishman Island, so naturally he'd be excited at the prospect of taking her on. And it's just I didn't think it would be Blackbeard either, just because of the fact that I feel like Blackbeard is going to be saved for the end. And I think also right now, as much as Luffy would want to beat the guy that, caused Ace's death, I don't think Luffy would have that kind of reaction to challenging Blackbeard. Not sort of this happy excited one. It would be more of a determined agreement if he did agree to go up against Blackbeard. So it had to either be Big Mom or Kaido in my mind. And I thought it would be Big Mom just because, all the history so far with her. Of course, we will eventually find out who they actually go after later on. The rest of the crew's reaction to this news in the next scene is absolutely hilarious. Usopp, especially freaking out at this prospect, was really funny to me. And also Law casually handing Chopper's badly beaten body to himself, where he proceeds to frantically treat himself and wrap himself in bandages. Then we get another iconic and classic moment from Punk Hazard, where Robin mentions that she will go along with whatever Luffy decides, showing just how much she trusts Luffy, but she does warn him that pirate alliances are typically fraught with betrayals. So Luffy insanely and nonchalantly turns to Law and asks him straight up, "Hey, are you gonna betray us?" And Law, without missing a beat, casually responds, "No." And Luffy turning back to everyone with this huge sparkly smile. It's just pure gold. Because it's so naive and everybody's like, this is not reassuring. But again, while this moment is definitely played for laughs and Usopp and Robin are right to be suspicious, especially given how trusting Luffy is, but when you look at his track record, Luffy has pretty much never been wrong when it comes to his reading of people due to his insanely attuned social and emotional intelligence, which is why, as a reader, I pretty much had no doubts by this point that Law was in fact going to be an ally, and if Law was going to betray them, that it would be a huge twist on Oda's part, I think, that he would have to lay a lot of groundwork to basically make believable. Not only that, but the absolute faith and confidence Luffy has in his nakama is on display here is really fun. As he mentions that even if he's wrong, he's got his newly powerful crew to help him take them out, to which they all, minus Robin, get incredibly bashful and overwhelmed with the high praise that Luffy just heaped upon them. And I especially love seeing Chopper in Sanji's body doing his sort of bashful dance where he's like waving his arms and just calling everyone idiots and stupid. It's so funny. I'd never thought I'd see Sanji doing that. But easily the best part of this entire scene has got to be Law's reaction to all of this, as he is the one immediately regretting all of his life decisions to this point. Like, the way Oda draws his face, you can instantly tell what he's thinking here. He's basically, these guys are idiots. What the hell have I done? I think this is really funny, but also a really interesting twist on the idea that, generally, we are wary about the shady person with a shady background forming an easy alliance with our heroes. And you have this general sense of sort of doom and uneasiness that they will eventually come back to bite our heroes in the butt later. But in this case, the script is completely flipped as the scene hilariously progresses. In just a few short minutes, it's Law that eventually really starts to fear who he's chosen to ally with, as Usopp points out that Law's idea of what a pirate alliance is most definitely different from what Luffy imagines it to be in his head. And you can also see Law really questioning how the Straw Hats operate as a crew as well. For example, how the captain seems to defer to his crew instead of imposing his will. Law just assumed that they would just leave Nami behind for wanting to do something so costly, yet Luffy immediately has her and Chopper's backs. Additionally, the idea of wanting to help the kids in the first place is surprising to Law as well. Law is in for a rude awakening if he thinks he can manipulate Luffy into doing his own will and bidding, because as we all know, Luffy does whatever the hell he wants to do, and everyone else is just kind of along for the ride. They have to improvise along with his crazy antics, which makes his alliance between the two an incredibly exciting and fun proposition for however long this alliance will eventually last. And to even further illustrate this during Usopp's lecture to Law about what it's like to form an alliance with Luffy, he's barely paying attention, picking his nose, and then flings the booger at Chopper's immobile body, and they start yelling at each other. And to top off this amazing scene, we get the insanely funny moment where Law needs to take Chopper with him to investigate the drugs that the kids have been fed. So Usopp ties Chopper's limp body to Law's head, which is both the cutest and funniest thing, but the best is everyone's reaction to it, especially Law's face, as he's just staring there in stunned disbelief at what is happening to him. This is the same fearsome Shichibukai that just dismantled, figuratively and literally, all the G5 Marine forces and that were led by Vice Admiral Smoker, now reduced to a man with the equivalent of a plushie doll strapped to his head, and he can't understand what is happening. And I can't tell you how hard all this stuff with Law made me laugh. It's just amazing writing and timing by reintroducing Law as this fearsome, ultra serious, and dangerous edgelord character, and then putting him in this ridiculous situation immediately after to bring Law back down to earth. And I think that was genius on Oda's part. It's in this scene we also get a proper introduction to Caesar's devil fruit power, and it has been confirmed by Law that he possesses the Logia fruit, the gas Nomi, or the gas fruit, and that no one without Haki should attack him. And we get confirmation from Luffy, actually, that Zoro and Sanji can also use Haki as well, which we kind of already figured, but we get concrete confirmation here. I do hope that the other members will eventually be able to use Haki. Even if they don't develop all three, I think it would be cool to have them be able to use certain Haki. Like armament would be really useful on Frankie and Robin, given their power sets. Especially Robin would be powerful, I think, if she can coat her sprouted limbs with armament. They'd be even more powerful, and she could actually take some hits to her, limbs. Nami and Usopp, I think, would be really great with observation Haki, since both their skill sets rely on being aware of their surroundings. Now, back with Smoker and the G5 Marines, they come to the realization that all the Centaur guards were in fact former prisoners that should have perished in the accident, but have confirmed that in fact someone was covering up what happened, and where the reports are, we don't know. Also, I have to give it to both Smoker and Tashigi. Like, Smoker is still doing work even in Tashigi's body without his devil fruit, and he's still a skilled fighter, and Tashigi's body is physically strong enough to withstand Smoker's fighting abilities, which is impressive. Although, there is something about in the next episode we'll see, or I think it's in the next episode, we'll see something that maybe that doesn't really, confirm this or not. It may just be Oda doing whatever he likes, because there is something that happens in the next episode that doesn't quite line up, I feel like, but I'll talk about that in the next podcast. But it's kind of unfortunate, though, that Tashigi isn't doing any fighting. Like, I would love to see her try and use the Moku Moku fruit powers and try and use Smoker's abilities to fight, but sadly, we will not get to see that. Lastly, to end this set of episodes, we see that Caesar is willing to do anything to make sure that no one escapes the island, so he lets loose another one of his experiments in the form of a massive poisonous slime monster named Smiley. And yet again, Caesar just shows that he lacks all forms of compassion or empathy for anyone, even those that serve under him. He is the definition of evil and selfish, only caring about himself, as all the centaurs that were sent to let Smiley out are killed in the process, and he just doesn't care. And in fact, he seems to relish and enjoy it, because he's always laughing about stuff like that. And at this point, I legit hate Caesar more than any other villain up till now. He has literally no redeeming quality. At least with villains like Crocodile and Lucci, sure, they were despicable in their own way, but at least they were cool at the same time, or, they had their own code or something at least. But Caesar is just despicable. I mean, Caesar's a more capable and sadistic version of Spandam, in my opinion. They both give off the same type of energy, just obnoxious and kind of weak, but not really. It's just really annoying to watch these two. And I will admit, Caesar does start to grate on you as the arc progresses. I think Caesar is another problem with the Punk Hazard arc, is that his character, while he's supposed to be annoying and evil, I think he actually gets to a point where it's too annoying. But we'll talk about that more towards the end of the arc. But yeah, things are finally starting to get cooking in Punk Hazard, as we have one of the most significant story developments in the entire story, with the formation of the alliance between the Heart Pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates to take down not only Caesar, but a Yonko Emperor, which is insane. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Although I already know how that turns out, but it'll be interesting to revisit those events. But yeah, anyways, we'll leave it at that. If you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram and Twitter/X account at SunnyGo Podcast. If you want updates of when I post new episodes, or see some pictures of my manga collection and my One Piece card collection now. But yeah, as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to listen to my podcast. Just a tiny spoiler section. I just wanted to mention one point that I couldn't really talk about in the non-spoiler section. But if you're not interested in that, stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye! All right, so spoiler section. I guess the one thing I wanted to talk about is just kind of the inconsistency with Law's attitude towards the sick kids. I feel like it's a little out of character considering all of the information that we know about Law now as of chapter 1132. So I think my biggest issue with this is the fact that, Law himself was a sick kid. And considering his past with Roshinante or Korasan, like he was saved because of a compassionate person that went out of his way to do anything to save this sick child's life. And Law is alive because of that attitude. And I don't know, I feel like him just kind of casting these kids aside, knowing his backstory, it just feels really out of character. Like I get Law has a mission and he's very one track minded in that regard, but I don't know, like you see how emotional he gets when he talks about Korasan. It just seems really weird. I don't know. I do think that this is a case where maybe Oda hadn't yet thought of Law's backstory completely yet, and he hadn't had that in mind. So when he wrote this part, he didn't quite have that in mind, so that it didn't really impact Law's characterization in this particular moment. And then later on, when he fleshes everything out and he creates that backstory with Korasan and Law and stuff like that, how he was a sick kid and Korasan did everything in his power, even risking his life to basically, and giving up his life to save Law and to heal him. And so, I don't know, I just feel like it seems weird to have Law kind of just cast these sick kids away like this. Because I feel like even Law would have at least tried to agree. Like, obviously he eventually relents and just does it, but it seems like he does it more so out of an obligation to an agreement with getting the Straw Hats to work with him, basically. Now, one case you may have against this kind of theory is the fact that a lot of the elements that are set up here in Punk Hazard are already like in place for Dressrosa. Like you have the appearance of Virgo being the mole from Doflamingo's crew, and then you have Doflamingo's attachment to the whole Punk Hazard and the Smile Fruits and everything. And so these two have a pretty large role. So, and considering how Virgo and Law have that emotional sort of fight between each other, you'd think Oda had already kind of set this up. And so I don't know why maybe Oda didn't think of like exactly how that moment would happen, but he just had to make it so that eventually there would be some sort of emotional core between Virgo and Law that obviously takes place in this arc that needs to be paid off in Dressrosa. So yeah, it just seems really odd, the story, and I do admit I think it's just basically just a situation where Oda just hadn't thought of that far enough ahead to make that. And I suppose you could even hand wave this moment away where Law opposed it, but he also did agree to it really quickly. So maybe he just kind of wanted to keep appearances up, that he was this edgelord, like, oh, I don't give a crap about these kids. But in reality, he did, which is why he so quickly agreed to help the kids. So you could even posit that it isn't out of character. He's just kind of making it seem like he doesn't care. Whether he does or doesn't, but yeah, it just does seem a little weird to have this moment really contrast with his backstory that we get in Dressrosa. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in the spoiler section. So thanks to listening to my ranting about that. But I hope to see you on the next episode. See ya.